You're listening to Convenience Matters, brought to you by Nax. We'll talk about what we see at stores and what the future may hold for our industry.
As we kick off the year 2023, what are some of the broad trends that will impact the convenience store industry? Our guest today is well positioned to answer those questions. She has previously held research positions at FMI, the Food Marketing Institute, so she knows about grocery and beverages. She's served a research position at the Green Charge Network, so she understands how people fuel and charge. And she's had a research position at the American Society of Travel Agents, so she understands how people move about. So, perfect person to dissect some of the things that are going on in the convenience store industry today. Joining us for our conversation today is Anne-Marie Roerink. She is the principal and founder of 2010 Analytics, in addition to all her background experience. So welcome today, Anne-Marie.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff. And until you pointed it out, I didn't quite realize how well I fit into the show today.
Yeah, take a look at some bios and see how things make a little bit more context, because, research is one thing, but the context behind the research is really how we can see some patterns in things, looking at what's going on. So let's just start off. You have spent your entire career in research. What are some of the things you're looking at related to pandemic? We'll just start right there. And some of the trip patterns that you are seeing or expect to see in 2023 related to both our industry and people in general.
Yeah, I think that's a great starting point, because at the end of the day, I cover a lot of different categories in the store: meat, produce, frozen, candy, snacks, what have you. And it's very interesting. Oftentimes I see the same trends happening in meat that I do in candy. And at first sight, you might say, what do those two have in common? But realistically, people never shop one channel. They never stop one store. So oftentimes, trends that you're seeing in one channel or in one category very much affect what we're seeing in other categories as well. So as such, convenience stores don't live on an island, right? They have to compete every single day against other convenience stores, which is where often our mind goes. But at the same time, we see just a lot of blending happening between the different channels, where convenience stores have become grocery stores, and grocery stores are focusing more on convenience. And you have food service that is moving more into convenience items as well. And so the whole landscape had been going through a lot of changes. But then all of a sudden, of course, the pandemic happened. The first couple months, as we all know, we spent a lot of time in our homes. Everybody was doing schooling from home, working from home. And that meant that convenience stores were hurting there for a little bit in the first couple of months. But I would say in 22, we saw a huge normalization, if not actually a boost in trips, and that mobility, that consumer mobility. In other words, how much are we out and about to bring our kids to school, to drive to work, to go to evening activities, to visit friends and family? The more mobility is happening in our society, the more that impacts the trips and the business that convenience stores are doing. And that has largely normalized. So there's a few occasions, I would say, where we're still seeing a little bit of pressure. So if we look at that morning coffee moment, for example, that was a huge one for a lot of convenience stores. And that hasn't quite come back yet from all the numbers I've seen. And I'd love to get your insights on that too. But at the same time, like I said, grocery geek that I am, I look at things like coffee, creamers. Where are they sitting next to 2019 numbers? And that's where we're seeing that people are still buying more coffee moment ingredients, if you will, whether that's the donut or the coffee or the creamer or anything like that, than they did in 2019. So we know that some of those moments are still sitting at home and haven't quite recovered yet. But by and large, with airplanes being an absolute nightmare right now for travel, we see a lot more road trips. We see a lot of normalization relative to people being out and about. So I actually think 22 was a good year for convenience, and I don't expect much less in terms of trips for 23. So is that what you're seeing as well?
Yeah, first off, comedian Dave Barry would use the phrase, that's a great name for a rock band. Now, rock isn't as popular as it used to be, but Meat and Candy, that sounds like a good name for a rock band. And I never really thought about the link there, but there are a lot of commonalities. You mentioned coffee, and I think that's a perfect entry point because when we look at convenience stores, you're absolutely right. The morning, when you look at fill-ups of fuel, you tend to see the morning peak and the evening peak, and then the third time is during lunchtime for fuel sales. Now, with the pandemic, 2020, 2021, and even 2022, there were still a significant number of people who were out of the commuting pool. And so we did see a decline in coffee, but we also saw another mini rush hour emerge. And for people who were staying at home, you tended to see maybe that 10:30 rush hour when some people have gone to work. The people who are working at home or no longer working want to get out of the house, want to talk to a human being.
Yep.
And same thing mid-afternoon. So we would almost see like 5 occasions where the store would have some sort of peak sales or at least traffic.
That's exactly what I'm seeing too. And I think I call it the old Starbucks moment, right? If you were in your apartment building or in your office building, you walk downstairs, grab some little snack or a coffee in the mid-morning, mid-afternoon. The thing about lunch and about working from home is that people don't want to leave the office, the home office, for very long. And so what we're seeing during lunch is people want to spend no more than 20 minutes on that lunch moment in getting the lunch to their desk or to their home, what have you. And so that's where I think convenience stores are so beautifully positioned, because convenience stores are all about the quick in and out, right? And that's what they've been specialized in for so many years. So it makes all the sense in the world that if somebody wants to just connect with somebody else for a moment or just get out of the house for a little bit, that convenience stores become that destination because of the fantastic programs in coffee, in sandwiches, pizza, and other lunch items.
Yeah, and you talking about they don't really shop by channel, and it also makes me think that will 2023 and beyond kind of look like the way things did 50 years ago, where there were small grocers, neighborhood stores, and maybe you don't want that typical 40 plus minute shop at a grocery store, although not to demean any other channels, but talking about preferences. And maybe there's an opportunity to do that 10-minute shop, which is longer than a typical convenience store. But, as we look at things differently.
And if you think about it, a lot of the big shop, for some people, we have to look at 30-something% of people do a true omni-channel where they order some items online and they still shop in store as well. Like the true online shopper, that's single digits, 4, 5, 6%, no more than that. So can the convenience store be that in-store trip, right? Where a lot of people start to stock up the big items online. And then when we do need a run in for those small stock up items that used to be that, second or third trip to the grocery store, because yes, there is a lot of pressure on time. And that's something that was vastly different in 22 than I would say that in 20 and 21. That was really that pressure on time was back. In addition to, we had the double whammy of spending a whole lot more money on food and everything else in life, plus that pressure on time. So there was just a constant balancing act between money and time. And we all know that in convenience stores, items tend to be priced a little bit higher, but that's also offset by being able to find super easy parking, quick in and out, finding all the little items that you might need. And people have been very willing to pay for that. So I do think inflation is obviously a huge worry among consumers. Month over month, we're starting to see it slow down and balance out. But year over year, yes, we are sitting at 15%. And if we go back to our pre-pandemic normal, food and beverage right now is 25% more expensive than it was in 2019 across all channels, all items. So if we figure that probably no one listening to our podcast is making 25% more than you were in 2019, that just means inflation has taken a bite out of all of our ability to buy food and beverage. So I think that balance between convenience and time versus money is becoming a bigger balancing act than it has been. And that's why I think it's really important to continue to truly deliver on that convenience. What makes you so special? Why would people come to you for that mid-morning, for the lunch, for the coffee, and for that gallon of milk as well?
And when you look at research, do you dive into those intangibles, or do you tend to look at P&L and how sales go through a register or something like that? Because it seems that the intangibles might be the way to differentiate yourself. What are you famous for? Is it employees? Is it the clean restrooms? Is it whatever it is to offset some of the price pressures that people may feel? How can they feel that you're looking out for their best interest? Because for some categories, say candy, tobacco, depending upon the state, people know what they will pay. They know what the minimum is and the maximum. And if you're off by a couple cents, they'll go somewhere else, just like they might for gas. So how do you keep them at your stores when price is one of the factors? How do you make it only one of the factors?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think differentiation is becoming more important. And, if you think about the big retailers, the big convenience retailers out of Pennsylvania that have always had to differentiate a little bit more because of their inability to sell items like alcohol, they have just really become known about their food service programs. And I'll tell you, I have an 8 and a 9-year-old, and when we have our ice cream moment, they don't want to go to the little ice cream store that is a couple blocks from our house. We drive by it to go to racetrack because they love serving their own little ice cream and battling me for how many pieces they get to put on top of that. Same for sandwiches. We have, I live in Florida, so I have a grocery retailer very known for their sandwich program. And of course, we have the Subways and Paneras of this world. But at the end of the day, my kids want to go to Wawa. And so I think being known for something allows you to compete. And at that point in time, when you're able to create that craving and that emotional connection, which is really what that is all about, then people are starting to be able to take that emotional connection and offset the price with something else in mind. So being known for something, I would say that's something we should all strive for in 23.
You also reminded me, our kids are a little older than that, but they still act that way. And in thinking back to when they were that age and the first time we used a freestyle machine, they probably spent 5 minutes customizing a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and same thing when they'd get a Slurpee. And your experience in talking about the ice cream, where they can customize their ice cream and you can go and get any kind of sandwich you want. You can literally create your own sandwich at these menus. Kind of strikes me that as we look at things like self-checkout, self-checkout is being used for a variety of reasons. One is to possibly save costs. But if you do it right, it feels like a customer benefit, perhaps, because people like being in control sometimes in how they order food.
Yep.
So maybe it can take off if it ties into how they pay for their food and feels like an embrace. Because I've went to one of the hardware stores this weekend, and they had people just standing in the aisles, like going, "Hey, come on, I'm open," and people just kept on using the self-checkout.
I agree. And I think the technology, it has to work and it has to be right. But talking about Wawa, I don't get to type on that screen. My 8-year-old lines up and she goes, "All right, tell me what you want." And she loves typing away on that and telling me what the options are. Conversely, I was in the airport a couple of weeks ago and ran by a McDonald's. They had the ordering screen, and I was probably fifth in line. 3 out of the 5 people in front of me walked away because they could not figure out how to order their meals. And so, to your point, I think kiosks and ordering screens can work really well. And of course, a lot of C-stores have also worked very well on an app where you can order ahead of time. The food is sitting there as you walk up. So it can be a great advantage, not just operationally, but really allowing people to even cut back further on that time where before they even get in a car, they've ordered the food. But at the same time, we can never forget that, it is technology, and that's a hard time to make a true impression. So I think still going the extra mile in how you then package the food, deliver the food, whatever it is. And talking about delivery, that's a really big one on my list as well, because what we're seeing in all my research is Gen Z, so those up to about 25 years old. And part of it is demographics. So they have much less likely to have a car. They do a lot more with delivery in restaurants as well. So how we see them interact with food is they are still more likely to eat out, but they're much more likely to do delivery than any other generation. So oftentimes I work with grocery retailers and they tell me, well, it's so expensive to work with a DoorDash or an Uber Delivers or what have you. So it's not worth it for us. And I said, well, but how are you connecting with the younger shoppers then? If you want to truly grow your food service program, and I think the same is true for convenience stores, there's obviously the financial implications of it all, but how are you truly connecting to everybody in terms of leveraging the program that you have?
So, talking about the normal, you mentioned something earlier in talking about the new customers in morning and things like that, and how the coffee sales are there; they've just changed, and it made me think that you could look at the pandemic two different ways. You could look at it as a 3-year blip. Now we're maybe back to normal, or you could look at it uncovered or changed consumer behavior that will not go back. And when you were talking about the coffee and the idea that people sometimes go in on the commute and get coffee, or they buy it at the grocery store, it struck me that there might even be a way for somebody to take advantage of this, where you can offer some sort of deal because if they're thinking, I'll go to the grocery store and I'll get my bag of coffee, I'll go to the convenience store, I'll get my cup of coffee. Maybe there's a way to pair them in some sort of unique way, not just that you have both, but maybe there's a subscription. Maybe there's something like that. So you're saying 3 days a week, come on in and get our coffee. 4 days a week, have our coffee at home, or something like that. Now, ideas are free, but they also may be worth that. But are there some of these big things that retailers can think about in convenience that the pandemic may have uncovered that are just sitting there ripe for picking?
Yeah, I'm going to refer to my deli prepared in grocery experience here for a moment. We all knew the salad bars had to be closed and the hot food bars had to be closed there for a while. And depending on the state, that was just a couple of months or more than a year. And so very quickly, grocery retailers moved into prepackaged. One of the things they uncovered was that people love the on-the-go convenience. Same in deli meat, right? The on-the-go deli meat was up triple digits, and now double digits over 2 years of triple digits. So the idea of being able to grab fresh cut deli meat, but not having to stand in line was huge. So what we saw in like salad bar sales was while they were closed, prepackaged salads actually offset the revenue that was made for salad bars. Well, then when salad bars were back open for some retailers, some decided never to open them back up. What we saw is that people used the salad bar for the instant consumable, and they bought a packaged salad for the next day or what have you. That is a concept that I think is so important for convenience stores, right? When you have people in the store for their morning coffee, can you sell them lunch as well? Can you sell them not just the instant consumable, but something for later in the day? And I've actually seen some great package deals. I believe it was 7-Eleven. It was in Phoenix. I was looking through some store flyers, and it was the $10 gets you your morning coffee and donut, but it also gets you your sandwich and soda for lunch. And so all of a sudden, that one moment has turned into 2 occasions. And I think that is a huge lesson for 23.
That's a really interesting concept in getting people back. There's this one convenience store chain in Nashville called Twice Daily. And their concept when they came up with a name was, we want to get you in twice daily. And that's one way to do it. And They had a variety of ways that they incented people to try to do that. But why not get them in more than once a day? If people are on the go, and you have multiple stores that might fit that profile, seems to be a really good opportunity to connect with that customer or different people in the family.
Absolutely. Yep. 2 for 1, right? It's always good.
Absolutely. So you had mentioned different places around the country. Um, you're in Florida. You were talking about Phoenix, 210 Analytics. That's the area code of San Antonio. So that's probably might have some connection there. You also spent time in Europe. And
Yes, I
that's
am.
originally from.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
so how do regional patterns play into C stores, and both in terms of where people are located or where people came from, and what are some possible lessons for how retailers can look at the coming year and years?
Yeah, I think it's really important that oftentimes that speakers like myself, an organization like yours, we have to look at the national level to see what the trends are. And, before you know it, you're breaking it out by generations and by income and by regions. But sitting above all of that are mega trends that we have to keep in mind. One of them, of course, is the fact that the majority spending is very quickly shifting from boomers to Gen X and millennials, and they just shop very differently. So when we think about millennials, they love C stores. They are really over indexing for purchasing at convenience stores. So I think as that dollar is shifting, that's a really important one to keep in mind. Secondly, the regional shift. So over the last couple of years, and it had started prior to the pandemic, but it really got accelerated during the pandemic, were the migration shifts. So we've seen coming from northern states to states like the Carolinas, Georgia, Florida, Texas, Phoenix, or the whole Arizona area. Idaho is a big one, etc. And so if you search up the migration patterns, you're seeing that states like Florida have picked up 34 million people. Well, that means that there's a lot more people living in those areas, shopping those areas, finding new stores to shop. But it also means that if you're in areas that have lost population, that your numbers might not quite meet up with the national level or those other levels. So as we're comparing benchmarks, it's important to keep in mind what is sitting behind that. And are you in an area that simply has fewer commuters? The other thing is the Northeast still has a lot more working from home opportunities, whereas other states have opened up more, sending people back to the office. So all of that, in other words, the mobility as well as the migration trends have a huge impact on the regional performances of the different chains.
And what you're saying ties directly to the store count that we just released. We work with Nielsen IQ on a annual store count. The convenience store count is up in 2023. We've gained stores, which is awesome considering there was the retail apocalypse, and then there was the pandemic, and our store count's up. So, but the 2 states that had the biggest increase were Georgia and Florida, which absolutely fits into what you're saying about the migration of people to different areas of the country. Any final advice for retailers and suppliers as they look at 2023? Are there a couple things that you say, hey, pay attention to this? I may not know now, but these are things to look at to see how the future may play out and where the customer is going.
Yeah. I actually am very optimistic for convenience stores for the simple reason that, yes, inflation is real, pressure on income is real. But at the same time, that smaller ring and just doing something nice for yourself, whether that's a cup of coffee or a little candy bar in the afternoon, whatever it might be. Oftentimes I see surveys that say, hey, how are you trying to save money? And people say, well, I cut back on non-essentials. Oftentimes I see the media's mind immediately go to snacks and candy and a cupcake and maybe that morning cup of coffee. In reality, all those areas are actually far outperforming what you would think to be primary goods. So people really believe in that emotional well-being, that just doing something nice for yourself. And I think that's a big position for convenience stores to be in. Like, we know you are balancing time and money, so we can help you there. It's okay to do something nice for yourself. We can do something there. And then the big seasons, that's something where convenience stores often sit on the sidelines, right? If we think about Valentine's Day that's around the corner, that's not something many convenience stores get in on. And obviously, it's way too late to plan for that. But drugstores were very, very big into seasons. Well, drugstores are reducing in store count. People are not going into drugstores as often because of many reasons, like prescriptions being mailed, etc. This is an opportunity for convenience stores to think of whole new meal occasions, whole new seasonal occasions, and really go after that business.
So our producer, Blake, works with other organizations and said that you really need to have Anne-Marie on. She spoke in another podcast, and she was terrific and knew everything about all the topics that were covered. So have her on. That's why we have you on. For those who want to continue the conversation with you, Anne-Marie, how can they find you?
The best way, and I would love to hear from everybody. I'm a storyteller, and the best stories come from the operators. They send me pictures, they tell me things, and I just love. I'm an eternal student of this industry. So the best way to find me is on LinkedIn, Anne-Marie Roerink, Roerink, and I love to hear from everybody.
Well, we love talking to you today, so thank you for joining us today, and thank you all for listening to Convenience Matters.
Convenience Matters is brought to you by NACS and produced in partnership with Human Factor. For more information, visit convenience.org.